This is Anna Fisher, and this is my presentation on the AI impacts and current copyright law. Currently, we're experiencing a generative AI boom and expansion, and it's raising certain legal and ethical questions. Namely, how do we define human authorship? And where does it fit? Where does AI material fit in terms of copyright? Other nations have their own policies and legislation, and it's putting pressure on the United States to keep up. But the bottom line is that both creators and AI developers want protection. Um, Opposite ends, obviously. And policymakers are seeking more clear rules. So, the United States Copyright Office has created an initiative with the main focuses being, can AI generated content be copyrighted? And is using copyrighted work to train AI, is that permissible? Is that allowed? Um, they've involved listening sessions, public comments, and inquiries. They've kept up to date with Congress, and they've released certain policy guidance and multi-part reports to respond to this issue. The early conclusion is that some level of human creativity will always be required. Purely AI generated material cannot be protected by copyright. Um, but they think current law is efficient and enough um, to handle these issues. They will continue to monitor technology as it evolves to decide whether or not policies need to be updated. Um, Congress has proposed laws such as the No Fakes Act to protect digital replicas and likenesses. Think actors and actresses, musicians. And the public seems to be pretty diverse and split on the matter. Creators fear, you know, not getting compensated for their work being used. They fear unauthorized AI training. Entertainment industries want protection for, again, actors, musicians, the protection of their voices, likenesses, performance styles. AI developers want protection because they want to ensure that they will not be blamed if something unlawful comes from their product. And scholars, both legal and non, seem to be split on whether or not the current law is sufficient to handle all of these issues. It seems pretty daunting. There's also the international aspect of the matter. Different countries have their different policies, their different regulations. The EU is more restrictive. All of this puts pressure on the United States um, to update laws. There's also an economic aspect that's now present because there's always a potential for investment in AI. There's this growing influence on treaty and trade. And of course, there's the issue of data governance, which, again, different countries have different laws and policies. What may be protected in one country is not protected in another. And the internet has no borders. So keeping those protections together and separate is complicated. And so the US is going to have to consider these issues when developing policy in the future and modifying current policy. But the bottom line is that there has to be human creativity in order to constitute authorship. Um, AI systems themselves cannot be considered authors. There has to be some level of human influence, whether it is editing, like with Photoshop or audio editors, um, how much was selected and arranged after an AI output was created. Um, did a human heavily modify or transform the material? All of this has the potential to be protected as long as there's that human influence. But the applicants for copyright protection must disclose every bit of AI involvement, what was created by AI, what was modified by them. So guidance for them is to clearly document what is human made versus what is machine made. Visual artists, writers, musicians, they should all disclose the base output that AI came up with and then the modifications that they made to give us the final form. That base that AI came up with, that output, that can't be protected. So they have to modify it in such a way that there's a heavy human influence. That can be considered protected by copyright. And again, failing to disclose everything that was influenced by AI runs the risk of the registration or the copyright just being canceled. So it's important to monitor, you know, best practices and for future policy changes. And speaking of the future, some concerns about this is there are certain things called black box AI models, and these are those in which we cannot see their inner workings. We don't know how they're creating what they're coming up with. And this makes the claims of human authorship a lot more complicated. If we can't see where the line begins and where it ends, we don't know what was AI and what was human. There's also growing litigation over training data being used, federal versus state regulations varying so much. There's an inequality aspect with smaller creators versus larger creators having more resources in order to protect their stuff more fully. And then, of course, the legal standards for sufficient human control is continuing to evolve. What may be true now may not be true in 6 months from now or a year from now. And so it's important for us as IT professionals, when we're creating technology, we're keeping the user and the creator in mind. We're enabling these systems, or we're creating these systems that enable for a finer level of human control. We can embed metadata such as prompts, edits, a generation history, or a log even, that will help creators show where AI began and ended and where human modification began. Companies can also use this to log human versus machine contributions. The most important thing is, as IT professionals, like I said, we have to keep the creators and the users in mind. We have to design interfaces that will allow them to be the best that they can be and to come up with what they intend to come up with so that they can protect what they come up with. Because that's our job as IT developers. That's the whole point, is to make the user's life easier. And so that's what we need to do. And that's it. Thank you.